Hello whisky fans, my name is Ingrid Anna Jones and welcome to Whisky Waffle. So today's topic, we're going to have a little look at what the number on a bottle of whisky stands for. So that is what you may know is referred to as the age statement, or the lack of the number on the bottle. So just before we kick off, please do hit that subscribe button, it's all totally free. And if you have any comments or any topic requests, please shove those in the comments below. And if you could hit the like button, that would also be really great. Thank you very much. So back to then, what is the age statement? What is that number that's on the bottle of whiskey, and what does it mean? And I've picked this topic because actually I think there's quite a lot of misunderstanding out there regarding this number and how it relates to the whisky. And also, once the whisky is bottled, what then happens to the number? And the reason for this, it was brought home to me again recently by an article that I read from a gentleman who had written quite an interesting article about whisky and a whisky that he'd picked up. And it was a 15-year-old whisky. And he said, oh, now, he's had it 10 years, that therefore makes it a 25-year-old whisky. Now, quite a lot of people do have this same kind of thought, but it's not actually correct. So whisky can only age when it's in a barrel. So when it's maturing and in that maturation process, that's when it ages. And once it's bottled, that's it. So if you have a bottle of whisky from 1977 and it's a 10-year-old bottle of whisky, it is still a 10-year-old bottle of whisky in 2020. It hasn't aged at all. It stays as it is. But the age statement is a little more complicated than that too, actually. So, as I said, some bottles have it and some bottles don't. So this is the figure that I'm actually referring to, just for those who don't know. You'll see on this Macallan, it very clearly states this is a 12-year-old bottle of whisky. Now I'm going to compare that to this one. This is a Highland Park, which is an independent bottler. And this bottle of whisky is a 24-year-old bottle of whisky. But there's a big difference between the two of these. And not just the age, or the double in age. One is the fact that the 24-year-old bottle of whisky also has on the label this. And that saying single cask is very key. So single cask does mean that whisky literally comes from one cask. That cask is bottled and that is that. So once that cask is finished, you will never find another one of those whiskies. Unless obviously someone's kept that bottle and put it in a cupboard and you find it years later. But there won't be any more produced. Wood, as you can imagine, that the barrels are made of, is a natural product, so therefore it does react slightly differently each time. So every barrel will create something slightly different. Now, the blenders and people in the distilleries do have an element of understanding when it comes to the wood. Some of them have people whose specific job is to obviously understand the wood and work with the wood and know exactly how to treat the wood in order to get the results that they want in the whisky. But it is still a natural product. So when you're creating a product like this one, the Macallan, you need to make sure that every bottle of that coming off the shelf is pretty darn close to the last lot that came off the shelf. It's like in batches, if you like. So every batch you produce is the same, because your customer who loves your Macallan 12 doesn't want to go and pick up another Macallan 12 in 3 months' time and find it's completely different. So one of the ways they do that is by mixing the whisky, or marrying the whisky is probably a better word, in the distillery. So single malt, when you have something that has single, it can be a malt or a grain actually, but single malt or single grain, which is, single malt especially is one that a lot of people will only drink single malts. But the single means it comes from one single distillery. So it doesn't mean it comes from one single barrel at all. It just means it's from one single distillery. But if you have single cask, as in the 24-year-old, then it is a single cask. But back to the 12-year-old, that there means it's not from a single cask, it is from a single distillery, but the 12 refers to the youngest whiskey that is in that bottle. So what's happened is in the distillery, as they are making and marrying this whiskey to provide you with something that is consistent to the last lot that you drank and consistent to what their expression is of that particular 12-year-old whiskey, they will have taken whiskey from different casks within their distillery to create that flavour profile. And it would also be the colour profile as well, because this is a natural colour, and if you're interested in that, then I talked about that last week, go check it out. But the 12-year-old then is the youngest whiskey, so it could well have 20-year-old whiskey in there, it might have a bit of 15, but it will have different ones, but the youngest is 12. So therefore that means if you have a 10-year-old, the youngest is then 10, or a 7-year-old, the youngest is 7. And this way that the distilleries can really create beautiful whiskies in a consistent fashion using the natural ingredients. It isn't a bad thing, this is how it's made. And if you think about it, whiskey is made from 3 ingredients. You're talking a grain of some sort, so single malt, it would be a malted barley, single grain would be another grain, or blended it would still be some sort of grain. You then add to that water, and then you add yeast. You then put it into a barrel, a wooden barrel that is a natural product and will colour and flavour that liquid as it sits and matures. Sometimes though it doesn't tell you the age, it'll actually tell you the distillery year, and it'll tell you the bottling. So it'll say it was distilled at this point and bottled at this point, such as this one. So this Talisker, if you can calculate it, you're actually working out it's a 9-year-old. Generally, if it's under 10 years, often they don't put an age on the bottle. I don't know why, I think it's just one of those things. I find some of the newer distilleries or some of the independent bottlers will put that on, but actually a lot don't. So this one, for example, yes, as you can see, is more of a 9-year-old, but it's not written on the bottle. Instead, they're telling you that it's distilled and when it was bottled. So I hope that clarifies that a little bit. Yes, I think it is one of those confusing points. Okay, that's it for today, and I look forward to seeing you again next week. Take care then, bye!